how do you turn your most overlooked player on the pitch into the tactical puzzle that wins the trophy? That's exactly what Pep did against Arsenal. And that overlooked player wasn't 2-goal O'Reilly. So let's take a closer look at who it was and how the tactics played out between Pep Guardiola and his former right-hand man Arteta, beginning with City in possession. Arsenal did at times look to press high when City were extremely deep with the ball, and their setup revealed a lot about where they thought City's true threat lay. Gyökeres would look to play Kushunov, while it was up to Saka coming in from the right wing to apply pressure onto the left-footed Ake, while both O'Reilly and Núñez took up traditional fullback roles. Arsenal backed up the high press, with Havertz being joined by Rice in a man-oriented press on the City pivots. The free men, had they remained like this, would of course have been the City fullbacks. And generally, we've seen Arteta go man-to-man in most games this season, which would have meant the ball-side fullback pushing up onto the City fullback, isolating the centre-back 1v1 against Doku or Semenyo, and this was definitely not plan A for Arteta. So instead, Zubimendi took up this hybrid position, ready to move wide onto O'Reilly or tuck into the midfield. But with Shirky drifting into the right-hand half space pretty early on, Zubimendi couldn't be expected to cover this much ground. So instead, Trossard often tucked all the way in onto Shirky, leaving Núñez as the only free man. And perhaps the Gunners viewed Núñez having the ball as a non-dangerous situation. As a result, Núñez had the second most touches on the pitch, but he was a catalyst for patterns that threatened to crack open the Arsenal shape. When he received, Shirky tended to drop into the right-back position, now forcing Trossard to go from a hybrid presser to committing to picking up one man or the other, often resulting in Shirky being able to receive. And now, this could begin to force Nketiah higher up the pitch, leading to the risk of the centre-backs being forced to come out wide and being isolated against the wingers. So we did see Arsenal become more passive at times defensively, dropping into a 4-4-2 that was quite narrow, with their main concern being cutting out the double pivot of Rodri and Bernardo. So again, that front six operated extremely narrowly around the pivots to ensure that. And interestingly, Pep's attacking shape was a slight resurgence of his 3-2-5, as Shirky and O'Reilly split the half spaces, with Haaland up top and Núñez as the right centre-back. And with Arsenal only having a double pivot, we would occasionally see Haaland looking to drop in to create an overload in the midfield and potentially receive line-breaking passes. And the Arsenal centre-backs could follow if they were man-oriented, though this would create gaps in the backline that the City wingers could potentially take advantage of. But all of that was just dressing, because the real threat was still through the Núñez-Shirky dynamic down the right-hand side. Again, with the Arsenal wingers being so narrow, and Saka and Gyökeres being on the actual centre-backs when pressing, the onus fell on Núñez with the ball. And when he got on it, initially, this was the press trigger for Trossard to spring forward and try to win the ball back. But this was a much less rigid 3-2-5 than Pep's systems of old, meaning that Shirky still looked to drop into the right-back slot, and with the likes of Haaland and O'Reilly threatening to attack the box, it would be a massive risk for a centre-back to come across and cover Semenyo, meaning that Shirky instead picked the ball up in space time and time again. And you can see just how many of his touches were in that wide region. And with this space, he would often look to drive upfield and combine with Semenyo, potentially leading to threatening scenarios. Alternatively, at times Shirky would actually remain a lot more central, creating the overload laterally instead, and opening up the passing lane into Semenyo so that he would have the potential to take on Nketiah 1v1 or hit the byline and get across into Haaland and O'Reilly crashing from his high position. As the game wore on, Trossard began to shift his priority more and more onto stopping the supply into Shirky and that potential wide overload. But rather than being passive on the ball, Núñez took on the additional responsibility of driving through that tiniest of gaps created, to either get into dangerous passing positions himself or to force Trossard or another defender to confront him, creating room out wide once again, opening up crosses. And what City did particularly well when the ball was out on the right was commit numbers to the box, which ended up contributing to both of their goals. But it wasn't just an on-the-ball performance from the citizens, as defensively, they used a ploy that has worked so well against them over the last 3 to 4 seasons. But just before we get there, if you enjoyed this video and want to dive deeper into learning the tactical side of the game, you can sign up for Football Fundamentals for free through the link down below. Football Fundamentals is my 30-day program that will teach you the basics of analysing football matches for absolutely free. City were barely interested in pressing when defending, but the interesting part was their shape. So often, City themselves have struggled to build against one particular structure, the 4-2-4. And today, they decided to use that very same approach against the Gunners. As soon as Arsenal sensed this, they were consistently looking for ways to overload the potentially vulnerable double pivot of Bernardo and Rodri, with Trossard keen to tuck in early. And at times, both White and Nketiah pushed extremely high to allow Saka to join the central overload as well. So here was the key for City. As much as possible, the centre forwards should not be drawn onto the centre backs or the goalkeeper, as then they would be hopelessly overloaded in that midfield, and the potential to chip a pass into the midfield would be on. This is why we saw Kepa consistently looking to bait the press in order to create that space. At the same time, City's front four couldn't afford to get too stretched laterally, as that opened up passing lanes. So the goal for that front four was to be compact and narrow, while Shirky and Haaland consistently used their cover shadows to ensure that the only way Rice or Zubimendi would be able to get onto the ball is if they completely dropped outside of the defensive shape. And it worked for the most part. But Arsenal were looking for solutions. If the centre was inaccessible, the threat would have to come from out wide. When the fullback stayed deeper and received, if the winger did not come across, the potential angle for a pass infield past the highest front four had been opened up all of a sudden. But perhaps the biggest threat was what happened down the right-hand side, as the 4-2-4 shape meant that if Arsenal were able to get past that first line of pressure, even if it was down the flanks, the opposing winger would be caught high up the pitch. And this presented the opportunity for the far side, as Nketiah and later Calafiori were both willing to push forward, which inevitably created 2 versus 1s at the back post against Núñez, which almost proved deadly. Overall, this was a closely contested encounter, decided by a combination of Pep manipulating the Arsenal left-hand side defensively, and City being able to break the deadlock first, and then being able to manage the game state. But what did you make of this match, and how do you think it will affect Arsenal's charge for a now treble? Drop it down in the comments below. The interesting thing is that over the past couple of seasons, Arteta has been one of the spearheads leading a tactical revolution that has forced Pep to adapt his own tactical approach. If you want to dive deeper into that revolution and the changes, check out the video linked on screen now. And don't forget to sign up for Football Fundamentals absolutely free through the link down below.